My husband cheated on me with our maid. I should be offended by him, but I am angry with our son, because he knew about everything. My father paid him money to keep quiet. He kept my father's affair a secret, sat at the same table with us, watched me kiss a man who had kissed another woman an hour ago, and said nothing. I hate looking into his eyes. He sold me out. He chose money over the truth. When I asked him, "How could you?" he replied, "Mom, I didn't want to hurt you." I said, "You both betrayed me," and left my own home. I left to return here as the sole legal owner. But before that, I fired our maid. I called the agency that sent her to us and told her everything. I ruined her reputation, but in reality, this was just the beginning. They all deserve my revenge. Don't say that revenge is a dish served cold. I followed the hot trail and dug up secrets that will shock you. She learns the whole truth about the maid, who wanted to take possession of their money in this way. Emma hires a person to plant bugs in the maid's apartment, and with this help listen to her conversations with her lover, and knows in advance about all her plans. She will do anything to expose the fraudster. If you watch this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the most interesting stories this week. I'm Emma from Chicago. I'm 58 years old. I thought I would live with one man my whole life and that it was impossible to cheat on a woman like me. So my dears, my husband divorced me to marry our pregnant maid. He was ready to give me $2 million in ransom. But I wanted only one thing: to get revenge on both of them for having an affair behind my back. My son knew about everything and didn't tell me anything. The maid is half my age. They say about such people, she's good for a daughter. But she wasn't even good for a daughter, because she was 10 years younger than our daughter Netili. Before packing up and moving into the house my husband gave me for our 40th wedding anniversary, I saw a neighbor who confessed. Our maid had a lover. She would take him to her house while we were away. And she told my naive husband that this child was his. That night I lay awake and chose between grief and revenge. I chose revenge. I made 3 lists: husband, son, maid. Under maid I underlined agency and called it dawn. I kept it cold. Misconduct, breach of trust. By lunch the contract was cancelled and her references revoked. It felt tidy, not satisfying. Rumors are crumbs. I wanted the whole loaf. I called Raphael, a fixer who installs cameras for churches on Sunday, and for the rest of us on Monday. "Don't text me the address," he said. "Write it. Burn the paper." At 2 p.m. we watched her leave her studio. Raphael, in a pest control jumpsuit, went in with fake glue traps hiding microphones and a pinhole camera aimed at the living room. 10 minutes later he handed me a receiver the size of a deck of cards. If she whispers to the wallpaper, you'll know. At 6:14 p.m. a man's laugh rolled through the speaker, young and careless. "Baby, he bought the I'm late story," he said. "I told you," she answered. "Old men fear diapers more than death." He promised the Lakeview condo and $2 million if the divorce moves fast. "Paternity test? Swapped at the clinic," she said. "The receptionist wants her daughter's nose fixed. Everyone wants something." Timeline: 5 weeks. He wants me to quit the agency. Poor Emma called at dawn, she said and laughed. The lover asked about a wire. "What's the memo?" "Same as the ones on the first. For school." He's consistent. 2,000 like a tithe. 2,000. First of the month. For school. I had seen that number before in year-end summaries I hadn't fully read. I wrote 2,000 and underlined until the paper bruised. That night I used the office code my husband never changed and opened the drawer where he kept birthday cards. Beneath tax receipts lay a green-lined ledger. The first of every month, $2,000 memo, for school recipient, L.R. Not a charity. Initials like smoke from a long-hidden fire. I photographed every page, replaced everything, and looked at our children's photo. My son's eyes were suddenly unfamiliar. I texted Raphael, "Tomorrow at a camera." "You sure?" he wrote. "Yes." At 3:58 the next day I sat 2 blocks from her building in a cafe. Tea steamed. The receiver hissed in my purse. The camera showed her sofa and her white sneakers by the door. At 4:07 a.m. woman's voice drifted from the apartment, older, careful. "Did he send it?" "Of course," the maid said. For your daughter. For our daughter, the woman corrected. He owes her more than money. The maid sighed. You and your initials. R. L. R. If Emma ever puts that together. On my phone the doorbell flashed. The maid crossed the room and opened the door, voice suddenly bright. Hi, Nate. My son stepped into view. I didn't move. A cold understanding clicked into place. The light in this tunnel wasn't morning. It was an oncoming train. Good, I thought. Let it come. I'm done standing on the tracks with my eyes closed. I didn't gasp, didn't drop the teacup, didn't sprint across 2 blocks and drag my son out by the collar. I pressed the receiver tighter against my ribs like a second heartbeat and listened. Hey, Nate said, breathless from the stairs. You said it was urgent. The maid's voice turned syrupy. It is. I need advice. You're good at smoothing things. Smoothing. He had smoothed over my husband's lipstick lies with Mom, it's work. He had smoothed over late nights and phone swipe texts. My son the peacemaker. My son, who negotiated my humiliation down to a quiet tone. Sit, she said. Springs sighed. I have a tiny problem with the clinic. Nothing big. Which clinic? He asked. She named the place where paternity tests became origami. Folded into whatever shape paid best. I wrote the name on my napkin and circled it hard enough to tear the paper. You have to be careful, Nate whispered. Chain of custody. If my dad gets suspicious. He won't, she cut in. He's romantic. He thinks the universe sent him a miracle at 60. He keeps saying, Emma will be fine. She has her charities. My charities. The youth orchestra, the hospice. The man I served soup next to, who laughed into his sleeve with our maid in the pantry and told himself the universe liked old men who feared diapers more than death. A door clicked on the feed. The older woman, calm voice, hadn't left. Nate, she said softly. Long time. Mrs. Reyes, he said. I didn't know you were here. I tasted metal. L.R. Leona Reyes. My pen hovered, then carved the letters cleanly. She wasn't a charity. She was a ledger entry with lungs and a daughter. I came about the deposit, Leona said. The 2,000. First of the month like church bells. Nate exhaled. I told him to move it off the business account. Mom ever. If Emma ever goes through the books. She won't, the maid chirped. She's too proud to count. Proud. Noted. You said urgent, Nate repeated. The maid's tone cooled. Dad, your father wants to speed up the wedding. He wants me to leave the agency this week. But I'm not walking away with promises. I need the Lakeview condo in my name before we announce. And the baby? Nate asked. Silence stretched as thin as sugar glass. It's his, she said. The receiver popped, her hand brushing the mic, as if lies could crackle. And even if it isn't, it will be on paper. Paper cuts, Leona murmured, and the words sliced. I ended the feed and sat perfectly still while the cafe around me clinked and hummed. There are moments your life shrinks to a single bright needle. It punctures you and suddenly everything threads differently. I paid, left, and drove to our anniversary house. The one with windows that held sunsets like wine. My keys still fit. They would fit until I changed the locks, which would happen soon. Down in my husband's study, I opened the desk again. The ledger blinked up, patient, as if it had been waiting for me to grow brave enough to read it properly. Every first of the month, 2,000. Eller. Notes, school, then books, then fees. It went back 28 years. 28 years. My son is 28. I pulled the files for old year-end donations. Tucked between donations to museums was a single tuition statement in a plain envelope. No letterhead, photocopied crooked. Loyola Community College, then DePaul. Student. Lila Reyes. Lila. Not Leona. The daughter. My husband had funded a girl I had never met, the same age as my son, and kept it precise. $2,000, a metronome of guilt. I inhaled and caught the ghost of his cologne on a sweater draped over the chair. I folded the sweater gently and moved it to a shelf. Revenge could be clean. I called Raphael. I need a second thing, I said. You want fireworks, he replied. No. I want paperwork. Boring, he said, but I heard him smile. What kind? Proof. The clinic. Any names you have. And I want the agency's placement contracts for the maid. I told them about her. Now I need them to tell me about her. I can get you what they don't realize they can give, he said. But you'll need a face-to-face for the clinic. I'm good with faces, I said. Mine looks like a donor. The next morning I put on pearls, not for beauty but for theater, and walked into the agency with a Tupperware of lemon bars and a folder labeled "Thank you." No one suspects a woman bringing sugar. I asked for the manager and placed a donation receipt on the table for their staff emergency fund. I loved our last maid, I said calmly, but I worry about her choices. If she's going to another family, that family deserves safety. The manager's eyes flicked to the lemon bars, to the receipt, to my steady hands. She slid a binder toward me to confirm dates, a simple curb of due diligence. My phone lay on the binder's edge, camera up. Click, click. Placement history captured like a butterfly between glass. I left with a smile, then called the clinic and made an appointment under the name of a widow from the orchestra board who wouldn't mind if her name bought a door to open. At noon I met Raphael in a parking lot in Pilsen where tamales steamed like prayers. He handed me a small black box. For the clinic meeting, he said. Picks up voices at 10 feet. Don't get brave, get facts. Facts are my new religion, I said. He chewed-eyed me. You sure you want to hear everything? Sometimes vengeance is peas. You think it's sweet, it's bullets. I'm sure. At the clinic, a receptionist with perfect nails and tired eyes checked my fictional name. Then the donation I'd pledged to their family assistance fund. Money, I had learned, wasn't a language, it was a translator. It made everyone fluent. The doctor arrived with a smile as convincing as stage lighting. How can we help? I have a friend, I began, and told a story about a hypothetical paternity test that needed a healthy dose of inevitability. He kept his face polite. Chain of custody is strict, he recited. We don't alter reality. Of course, I said, and placed on the desk a printout of a text message Raphael had recovered from the maid's lover. Swapped at the clinic. Nose job for receptionist's daughter. Everyone wants something. The doctor's smile wavered like a candle near an open window. I'm not the police, I said lightly. I'm a disappointed donor. My disappointment travels. He sighed the way men sigh when they realize a stagehand has seen them drop the sword that wasn't a prop. What do you want? Chain of custody footage for the past month. Names. Logs. And I want you to call my husband, I said, sliding his card across the desk, and tell him the lab recommended a retest because of a processing anomaly. You'll sound concerned. You'll use the word standard. Men love standard. You can't. You already did, I said softly, tapping the printout. I'm asking you to be accurate for once. I left with a promise of an email and walked into a thin, bright afternoon that felt like the blade of a new knife. That evening I turned the receiver back on. In the maid's apartment, laughter bubbled, too high, too bright. Guess what? She was telling Nate. The clinic called. Processing anomaly. We need a retest. Your dad's freaking out, but I told him it's fine. Nate swore. Did you pay the wrong person? Please, she scoffed. I always tip the devil. Leona spoke then, low and flinty. Be careful. Men who believe they deserve miracles also believe they deserve forgiveness. And women who earn miracles, the maid sang back, hire lawyers. I closed my eyes. Lawyers. I had one too, the one who drew up our family trust a decade ago and had once told me, Mrs. Carter, you could run the boardroom if you chose. I hadn't chosen. I had arranged flowers for the gala and trusted. Trust is a lovely chair until you notice it only has 3 legs. I called him at 9. I want to exercise every right the trust affords me, I said. And I want to know if the Lakeview condo can be frozen. He's moving assets. He cleared his throat. Technically, you're co-trustee. If you have cause to protect the corpus. I do. Then tomorrow bring me cause. We'll file an injunction before he can blink. I smiled in the dark. He blinked slowly. I've been timing him for 40 years. Before bed I texted Raphael. One more thing. Find Lila Reyes. I want to see her face before the truth breaks it. He replied with a pin. A coffee shop in Logan Square. Tomorrow 4 p.m. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. You punished yourselves, I whispered to the quiet house. I just set the lights so the audience can see it. Tomorrow I would meet the girl my husband had bankrolled for decades. The same age as my son. The girl my son had matched with on an app. The girl he'd begun to love without knowing her last name's Echo. The stage was built. Now it was time to pull one curtain string at a time. The coffee shop was crowded enough that secrets could vanish into the sound of milk steaming and keyboards clicking. I sat in the corner with my cardigan draped like armor, watching the door. At 4:06 she walked in. Lila Reyes. She was almost painfully young in her movements, but her eyes were my husband's. I knew that in an instant. The tilt of the head, the way her gaze darted like she was afraid to be recognized. A face my son's age, but carved from the same bone as the man I had once trusted. Raphael slid into the seat across from me, his jacket smelling faintly of cigarettes and cold air. That's her, he murmured. Student loans, part-time bartender. Innocent enough on paper. On paper. My whole marriage had been on paper too. A perfect ledger that hid rot in the margins. Lila ordered tea and sat 2 tables away. I studied her profile, the way she smiled politely at the barista. She was pretty in that unpolished, almost fragile way. I should have pitied her. Instead, I felt the kind of anger that has no sound, only a pulse. Does she know? I asked. Raphael shook his head. Not about him. Not about your son either. I checked her socials. She matched with Nate 2 months ago on some app. He's been careful but not careful enough. 2 months. My son had been sneaking into another woman's apartment while his wife folded laundry at home. And their son asked where daddy was. And the woman was his half-sister. My husband's bloodline had looped like a snake eating itself. I wanted to storm over, grab her by the shoulders, shout the truth in her face. But strategy whispered louder. If I shattered her now, she'd run to him, to them, and they'd circle their wagons. No. I needed her to reveal herself in front of the right audience. So I left. But not before slipping a folded $100 bill under Raphael's coffee cup. Follow her. Everything she does. Every conversation. I want timestamps. That night my husband called. His voice was shaky, rehearsed. Emma, I want to talk. About settlement. About moving forward. Forward? I asked, keeping my tone smooth. Is that what you call crawling into the bed of a girl young enough to be your daughter? He cleared his throat. This doesn't have to be ugly. You'll be taken care of. The condo, the 2 million. I don't want your hush money, I snapped. I want the truth. Silence. Then in a low growl. The truth won't help you sleep at night. I hung up before the anger in his voice could stick to me. 2 hours later, Raphael texted. Your son just left her place. 1:12 a.m. I filmed the exit. I stared at the video. Nate, my firstborn, slipping down a stairwell like a teenager sneaking past curfew. Shirt rumpled, eyes guilty. My baby boy betraying his wife, betraying his son, betraying me. I poured myself a glass of wine, but the taste was bitter. Betrayal doesn't wash down with Merlot. It stays lodged like glass in your throat. The next morning my daughter Neteli called. Sweet Neteli, always the one who tried to keep me steady. Mom, she said gently, I saw Dad yesterday. He looked nervous. He said you were being difficult. That you won't sign. Difficult, I repeated, laughing sharply. Is that what he calls refusing to let him sell my dignity for a condo deed? Mom, she hesitated. There's more. I don't know if I should tell you. Tell me everything, I said, my voice iron. She sighed. I overheard him on the phone once. Years ago. He was arguing with someone about money. He said, I've paid you every month since she was born. I thought he meant a charity. But now. Her voice cracked. Mom, was there another child? I closed my eyes. My daughter. Asking me to confirm the ghost that had haunted my marriage. Yes, I said. Her name is Lila. Silence. Then a whispered. Oh my God. Don't worry, I told her. This story isn't over. And when it ends, it will end on my terms. That afternoon, Raphael delivered a folder thick with photos. Lila at work, Lila with friends, Lila at the library. And Nate, appearing in too many of them. Smiling at her, leaning close, touching her hand across a cafe table. I forced myself to look at each one to feel every stab of betrayal. This wasn't just about my husband anymore. It wasn't just about the maid. It was about my son choosing lies over blood, choosing desire over decency. I placed the photos in a neat stack, tied them with ribbon, and slid them into my drawer. Someday, I would hand them to my daughter-in-law. Not today, not yet. Timing was everything. That night, I listened to the feed again. The maid's voice filled the room, playful, manipulative. "Don't worry, baby," she told her lover. "Once the condo's in my name, we'll be untouchable." And then I heard my son's voice, soft but certain. "I'll help you. Whatever you need." I pressed pause. My own flesh and blood. Aligning with the woman who had destroyed our family. Aligning with her against me. I whispered into the empty room. "Fine. If you've chosen your side, then you've chosen your fate." Tomorrow I would move to phase 2. My husband thought he could buy me off. My son thought he could lie his way out. The maid thought she could con her way into a fortune. They all underestimated me. And that would be their downfall. I slept like a coiled thing. Ready, patient, not furious in a way that weakens you but precise in a way that sharpens. Dawn came gray and honest. I made coffee and typed an email to my attorney with the calm of someone setting a chessboard. Motion to freeze transfers, request for accounting, demand for emergency trustee meeting. I attached photos, the ledger scans, and Raphael's timestamps. The subject line read, "Injunction. Immediate." By 9 the lawyer called, voice low and efficient. "Mrs. Carter, this is actionable. If we file today, we can halt transfers and force an audit. Your co-trustee has been moving funds. We'll need cause." "I'll bring you cause," I said. "And a witness." I heard his breath catch. "And a witness who will testify that he knowingly paid for another child." "Be ready for ugliness," he warned. "Ugly is the new honest," I told him. The legal machinery hummed like a well-oiled engine. Papers were signed, not with flourish but with the steady hands of someone used to contracts and committees. I felt an absurd pride at the neatness of it. Revenge organized into legal rectangles. I was not a cartoon widow setting fires. I was a woman learning to use the law like a scalpel. While the petition filed, I had a different kind of work to do. Night cameras and bug departments could show transactions and plans, but hearts, those crooked secret chambers, needed other techniques. I called an old friend from the hospice board, Maria, who ran a grief support group and had a soft way of getting people to reveal the one thing they'd sworn to hide. "I need you to be a friend to a girl," I said. "Just be kind. Bring soup. Make space." "Is she in pain?" Maria asked without pity or curiosity, just the focused mercy of a woman who'd seen every face of sorrow. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe she needs someone to notice her." That afternoon, I donated to a scholarship fund in Lila's name. The same fund my husband had apparently funded. A neat, monstrous mirror of his guilt. I left a note in the fund records. "In honor of all girls who deserve the truth." It was petty and public. I liked the seasoning. Raphael kept feeding me breadcrumbs. My son's late-night schedule showed a pattern: Tuesdays and Fridays dates with Lila. Always after his family time. He'd engineered pockets, like a man who thinks small absences can hide large betrayals. Then, an unexpected cleavage in the plot. My husband made a mistake. He called Netili. "Your mother is being difficult," he said, with the fatherly arrogance of a man who'd always believed he could reason his way out of any moral mess. "My mother?" Netali's laugh was brittle. "You mean the woman you married for years and then betrayed?" He stammered. "That's not." "Yes it is," she said. "And I want nothing to do with anyone who thinks money can buy silence." He tried to charm. She didn't answer. That night at 7 there was a knock at my door. A woman I'd never met stood on my porch, rain on her coat, clutching a battered portfolio. "You must be Mrs. Carter," she said. "I'm Lila's mother." Leona looked smaller up close. She had a farmer's dignity, hands like people who handled soil. She walked in like someone who had carried a secret for a long time and was tired of its weight. "You knew?" she asked almost immediately, settling at my kitchen table. "Knew what?" I asked, letting the question box her in. She inhaled. "That my daughter's father, your husband, has been sending money. I thought it was charity. I thought he felt sorry." But the other day when he offered to move her into a condo and told my girl to leave the agency, I realized I had been living inside someone else's apology. Her voice broke then, but not from shame. From years of misdirection. He gave us money, but he never gave us the truth. And Lila, she's confused. She thinks he cares. I watched her. Rage rose, but it had a different shape now, shared instead of solitary. This woman had been as lied to as I. Why didn't you come sooner? I asked. Leona shrugged. Pride, maybe. I thought I was protecting her privacy. When you called that agency, she panicked. She thinks you hate her. Hate her? I echoed, the absurdity stinging. No. I want the truth to be out. Not the humiliation, but the truth. She deserves that. So do you. We drank tea and traded stories like people swapping tools. She told me about Lila's nights, odd jobs, evenings spent paying tuition with overtime shifts. She told me about the one time Lila had mentioned a man who smelled like citrus and regret, a man who'd propped open doors and promises with cash. You're saying he's her father? I said slowly, tasting the word like copper. Leona nodded. He paid for school. He sent money. He promised things. But when I asked, he begged me not to rock his life. We complied. We complied, I repeated, and the phrase knotted a rope between us. We were both women who'd bowed our heads for the convenience of others. That night, after Leona left, I called Netilai and asked her to come over. She arrived with her hair in a braid and eyes that had the soft worry of daughters who worry by default. I brought you something, I said, and showed her the ledger printouts and photos. She read them without comment, her hands steady. When she finished, I said, We're going to do something a little dangerous. Netilai looked up, eyebrows knitting. Like what? Like telling the truth in a room big enough to hold it. We planned. Not for fireworks, there would be time for that. But for a setting where the lies would be exposed and the players could not slither away. The trustee meeting. I had already filed for an emergency audit. A trustee meeting would convene with lawyers, and our husband would be forced to account. You can't force anyone to confess, Netilai warned. No, I agreed. But you can make it uncomfortable for them to keep lying. Over the next 2 days I watched my family like a map. Nate continued his double life, moving between his wife's text messages and Lila's late-night corners. My husband stayed oblivious in public but jittery in private. He slowed his steps like a man who felt the thrum of a net below. He kept checking his phone. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed for court in a blue suit that made me look like a woman who could be trusted with complex things. I wore flat shoes and a necklace I'd bought with my first paycheck, the one that reminded me I had worked before marriage and could again if necessary. At the hearing, the air smelled of printer ink and impatience. My attorney spoke with the calm of someone who knows the law's long memory. He presented the ledger, Raphael's recordings, and the clinic's tentative findings. The judge leaned forward. My husband's attorney protested. There were motions and counter-motions. Then, like a drama that had been building in tense little acts, my husband's face drained. He left the room and returned with a small envelope. He set it on the table and, with the ridiculous dignity of men who apologize with paper, said, I had a daughter. I thought I was doing the right thing. The room hummed. I felt nothing for a heartbeat, and then, fury that has the shape of ice, rose in me and settled like a crown. You thought you were doing the right thing by lying? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. By secretly funding her life and leaving me to trust a marriage that was a lie? He swallowed. I was ashamed. I thought it would be kinder. Kindness without honesty is theft, I said. The judge looked at him, then at the ledger, then at me. We will continue this matter, the judge said, and an audit will be ordered. In the meantime, I recommend mediation. Mediation. A polite word for ugly truths wrapped in the language of civility. As we left the courtroom, my husband tried to touch my elbow, some old habit of closeness, and I stepped back as if from a snake. Netilai walked beside me, not angry, not yet forgiving but present. A new family constellation was forming, blunt, painful and strangely honest. That night, the maid threw a party in her rented apartment. I listened as Raphael gave me the highlights, champagne, laughter that fell too easily, and my son leaning over Lila's shoulders, speaking like a man who believed in small rebellions. They had no idea the audit was on its way. They had no idea that truth has a way of catching up exactly when people think they're safe. I poured myself one small glass of wine and smiled to the empty house, a smile that tasted like victory and something else. Compassion for the little people who are used as props in rich men's dramas. I promised myself aloud to keep that compassion and not let revenge turn into cruelty. Tomorrow I thought would be a day of counting, of money, of lies, of consequences. And I would be the one counting. The day after the hearing, the sky over Chicago turned the color of steel. I watched the clouds move and thought, perfect. Storms make people reveal themselves. I didn't have to wait long. By noon my phone buzzed. Raphael. Your maid just called a lawyer, he said. She's smarter than she acts. Wants the condo papers fast-tracked. Of course she did. A woman like that knows fortunes vanish like smoke if you don't grab them with both hands. But her timing was bad. Very bad. Because the audit had begun. My lawyer confirmed. Every account, every transfer, every deposit was being pulled into daylight. Mrs. Carter, he said. Your husband has been moving assets for years. Slush accounts, tuition payments, condo deposits. You were kept deliberately out. I bit back the sting. Deliberately out. That phrase burned. I had been wife, mother, hostess, fundraiser, and yet in the one arena that truly mattered, the books, I had been erased. Can we stop it? I asked. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that belongs to a man who has seen fortunes topple. We already did. The injunction holds. Nothing leaves until the audit's complete. That night I turned the receiver back on. Laughter, glasses clinking. The maid and her lover again. And then Nate. My son. His voice low, guilty. What if the test comes back wrong? He asked. The maid laughed. Wrong? Please. Tests are for people who can't buy loyalty. Your father's paying the right people. You don't get it, Nate whispered. If this baby isn't his and Mom finds out, she already hates me. She cut him off. What difference does another lie make? Another lie. The words sank like a stone in my chest. I closed the receiver. My house felt too big, too quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with the photos Raphael had given me. Nate with Lila. Nate smiling like he hadn't smiled in years. My boy glowing with a secret he thought was love. I wanted to scream at him. She's your sister. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I broke the news without proof, he'd call me bitter. Accuse me of inventing stories to hurt him. He had already chosen his father's silence once. I wouldn't let him choose blindness again. The next day Leona called. Her voice was strained. Mrs. Carter, my daughter is in trouble. She's falling for someone, and I don't know how to stop it. I swallowed. Is his name Nate? Silence. Then a ragged, yes. Listen to me, I said. We can't stop her by shouting. We need her to see it herself. To see who he really is. If she hears it from us, she'll defend him. But if she discovers it, she'll break, Leona whispered. Better she breaks now, I said, than after she's destroyed. That afternoon I set a plan in motion. I asked Raphael to follow Nate not just at night but during the day. His wife deserved the truth too. She had been loyal, raising their child while Nate played double lives. And Raphael delivered. Photos. Nate kissing Lila outside a bookstore. Nate laughing, hand on her waist. Nate texting, oblivious to the stroller his wife was pushing a block away. I printed the photos and placed them in a plain envelope. No note. No signature. Just truth, raw and unadorned. I mailed it to his wife with trembling fingers. Not to destroy her, but to give her what I never had, knowledge. That evening my husband called again. This time his voice cracked with real fear. Emma, they froze the accounts. I can't move anything. The condo, the settlement, everything's stuck. Good, I said. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. I cut him off. For 40 years you let me play hostess while you played God. Now you'll play nothing. He went silent. I imagined him pacing, jaw tight, hair thinner than it once was. He thought money made him untouchable. Now money was the very rope around his neck. Later, Raphael texted me a single sentence. Your son is spiraling. I called him immediately. What do you mean? He's drinking. Talking too loud. Told a friend at a bar that he's in love but can't tell anyone. He said he'd rather burn everything down than give her up. Burn everything down. My son, my blood. Ready to destroy his family for a secret that would shatter him the moment it came out. I sat at my vanity mirror, staring at the lines in my face. I looked older, yes, but stronger. A woman forged in betrayal, sharper than she had ever been. Then we let him burn, I whispered to my reflection. But only his lies. Not the truth. Never the truth. The next morning, I opened my laptop and drafted a speech. Not for a gala. Not for a fundraiser. For a reckoning. I would call a family dinner, husband, son, daughter, maid, even Lila. And in that room with no escape, I would lay every card on the table. They thought they were clever keeping me blind. But I wasn't blind anymore. I had eyes everywhere. And ears in places they didn't know existed. This wasn't just revenge. This was revelation. And when it came, it would be final. I called it a family dinner. My voice was calm, my words measured. I told each of them, my husband, Nate, Natalie, even the maid, that we needed to sit down, share a meal and stop hurting one another with silence. Silence. That word tasted sweet on my tongue. They thought silence was their weapon. Tonight silence would be my trap. Natalie was the only one who understood. Mom, she whispered over the phone. This could explode. Good, I said. Explosions clear the air. We set the table in the anniversary house. Ironic, poetic. White linen, polished silverware. The kind of table that once hosted charity patrons and laughing children. Now it would host betrayal and revelation. At 6 sharp the doorbell rang. My husband entered first, shoulders squared, tie too tight. He looked around the house as if he still owned it. He didn't. His eyes landed on me, searching for mercy. He found none. Nate arrived next. He hugged me awkwardly, guilt radiating off him like cologne. His wife was absent. That told me she had received the envelope. My heart ached for her, but tonight wasn't about her pain. It was about the truth. The maid came last, hips swaying, hand resting on her barely their belly as though cradling proof of her victory. She smirked at me, the kind of smirk young women wear when they believe they've won. And then one final knock. Lila. She stepped in, uncertain, holding her mother's hand. Leona looked at me once, eyes steady, then guided her daughter inside. My husband's face drained of color. Nate froze. The maid's smirk faltered. I stood at the head of the table. Sit, I said simply. They obeyed. For a few minutes I let the charade play. Bowls of soup, clinking spoons forced small talk. My husband cleared his throat twice. Nate asked about Natalie's work, pretending nothing was wrong. The maid laughed too loudly. Lila stared at her lap. Finally I set down my spoon. The sound rang like a bell. We're going to speak plainly, I said. No more lies. Emma, my husband began, but I raised my hand. You had a daughter, I said, staring directly at him. You paid $2,000 a month for 28 years. You lied to me, to our children, to her. I pointed to Lila, whose eyes widened in horror. This is your blood. The room went still. Nate's spoon clattered against his bowl. What? He whispered. I turned to him. Meet your sister. Lila gasped, covering her mouth with trembling fingers. Nate's face drained, then reddened. That's impossible, he stammered. Look at her, I said. The same age as you. Conceived while I carried you inside me. Your father lived 2 lives, and you? I leaned closer, voice sharp as glass. You nearly lived the 3rd by falling in love with her. Lila recoiled, eyes wet. You're lying. Leona's voice cracked as she reached for her daughter. No, baby. It's true. The maid's smirk was gone now, replaced by panic. She looked at my husband. You didn't tell me this. He dropped his head into his hands. I wanted to protect everyone. Protect? I laughed bitterly. You call decades of deceit protection? Nate shot to his feet. Mom, stop. You're humiliating us. No, Nate, I said coldly. You humiliated yourself when you chose silence. When you took his money to cover his affair. When you betrayed me. His jaw clenched. I didn't want to hurt you. You did worse, I said. You let me live in a lie. Lila bolted up, chair scraping. I can't. She ran toward the door. Leona followed quickly, murmuring reassurances. The maid looked around wildly, trapped. This is madness. I'm pregnant. I deserve respect. I turned on her, my voice low but lethal. Respect isn't bought with lies. You thought you could trap him with a child. You thought you could erase me. But now the world knows the test is under review. You'll have nothing but shame. She paled. My husband tried again, voice shaking. Emma, let's handle this privately. I slammed my palm on the table. No more private. Privacy is where you hide sins. From now on we live in the open. Nate sank back into his chair, face buried in his hands. The maid looked ready to cry. My husband stared at me like I was a stranger. Good. Let them see me as a stranger. I was no longer the wife who smiled at galas, no longer the mother who smoothed over their mistakes. I was the storm they had called down with their lies. When it was over, I stood, smoothed my skirt and said, "Dinner is finished. Leave my house." They left one by one, broken pieces trailing behind them. I locked the door and exhaled. My hands trembled, not from fear but from power. For the first time in decades, the truth belonged to me. But I knew it wasn't the end. Revelations are only the beginning. Consequences come after. And I would be the one to deliver them. The house held a new kind of quiet the morning after the dinner. Less like absence, more like aftermath. It felt as if the walls themselves had exhaled. I brewed coffee and opened the window to the slow Chicago rain. It sounded like rinsing. My phone lit up with the day's reckonings. First, a text from my attorney. Audit team found undisclosed custodial account fed from business line items labeled community outreach. Paper trail is weak. Will subpoena vendors. Second, a message from Raphael. Your son didn't go home. Slept in his car for 2 hours, then drove to the lake. Tossed something in. Looked like a phone. He's scared. Scared is not the same as sorry. I tucked that distinction into my pocket. Third, a voicemail from an unknown number. I recognized the tremor in the breath before I recognized the voice. Lila. Mrs. Carter? I don't know why I'm calling you. I guess because you sounded like the only adult in the room. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. If you ever want to talk, if you want me to stay away from everyone, I will. I saved the message and stared at the rain. If revenge were a blade, Lila was not the handle and she was not the target. She was the slice I could choose not to make. I called Leona. Your daughter called me. Bring her over at noon. No traps. Just tea. At 11, my lawyer's assistant sent a draft. Emergency removal of my husband as managing trustee pending audit findings. The language was dry and devastating. I reviewed each clause with the same care I once gave to gala seating charts. Revenge, yes, but also governance. My name would stand on this paper. It needed to be clean. Noon came. Lila entered my kitchen with a face that looked like grief had been sewing it shut all night. She sat where she had sat the evening before. Only this time there were no white linens, no theater. Just 2 mugs, steam, and the quiet space between 3 women deciding what kind of women they were going to be. I didn't know, she said again, eyes full. I wouldn't have Nate. She swallowed hard, and I saw the flinch at his name. You stop apologizing for what men hid from you, Leona said gently. Apologies belong to the liars. I reached across the table and laid my hand over Lila's. This is not your shame, I said. But it is your exit. You will block his number, you will tell your therapist everything, and you will write down what you need from us. Tuition. Rent. Not from him. From us. No secrets in our house. Her eyes lifted, startled. Why would you, after everything he did to you? Because kindness with honesty isn't theft, I said. It's repair. A tiny cracked smile. I can pay my own way, she whispered. But knowing you offered, thank you. When they left, I wrote out a new list and numbered it. 1. Husband, remove as trustee, freeze Lakeview, force retest, force accounting, alert board of foundation to governance lapse. 2. Maid. Civil action against clinic and agency. Complaint for fraud. Restraining order if necessary. 3. Son. Protect daughter-in-law and grandson. Offer support contingent on boundaries. No access to trust distributions while under review. 4. Lila and Leona. Referrals, scholarships, therapists. Doors that open without debt. Raphael pinged me. Clinic scheduled retest tomorrow 9 a.m. She's spooked. Lover texted her. We can still fix this. I typed. Let her try. Cameras on the clinic entrances. Audio if legal. Don't interfere, document. He sent a thumbs up and seconds later. A grainy still from a security cam 2 blocks from my husband's office. My husband and the maid in a silent argument. Her hands slicing the air. His shoulders bent with the dumb pride of a man who refuses to look at the fire he started. At 2 p.m. Another reckoning. My daughter-in-law, Hannah, stood on my porch with our grandson on her hip, rain stippling her coat. She was not a fragile woman. Grief made some people shatter and others sharpen. She had sharpened. I got your envelope, she said. No hello, no small talk. I wanted to hate you for sending it. Then I wanted to kiss your feet. I settled on asking for a chair. I gave her a chair and a dry towel for her hair, and I braced. He is sick with shame, I said quietly. But he is still lying. I won't invite that into your house. A muscle ticked in her jaw. I'm filing for separation. He can see his son only when he's sober and scheduled. I told him the terms. He called me cruel. I told him I was finally awake. I poured cocoa for the little boy and tea for Hannah. If you need a lawyer. I do, she said. A good one. Not your husband's brand. You'll have the best, I said, and texted my attorney before the kettle finished singing. By late afternoon, my attorney filed the motion to remove my husband as trustee. The notification pinged both of our phones. 2 minutes later my phone rang. You're destroying me, he said without preamble. No, I said. You destroyed the version of yourself I once trusted. I'm protecting what's left. I'll fight it. You'll lose, I said, and I didn't raise my voice. Because for once the facts aren't on your side. He hung up. Perhaps for the first time in our marriage, he understood how it felt to be on the receiving end of decisiveness. Evening fell early and brought with it a storm that rattled frames on walls. Around 9, the receiver in my desk thrummed. The maid's apartment again. She wasn't laughing. She was pacing. Tomorrow you'll go in, the lover said. You'll bring the brush. What if they watch me? She whispered. They won't. You're pretty, you're pregnant, they'll treat you like a snow globe. Shake but don't break. Emma, she knows everything, the maid said, voice thin. She's everywhere. You're panicking, he snapped. Money is loud. Be louder. I smiled to myself, that small sad smile you give a child who thinks shouting will make the moon fall. Raphael's text arrived as if on cue. Brush is tagged. If she swaps, we'll know which. Tomorrow, I whispered to my empty kitchen. We let the truth pick its teeth. I slept briefly and woke before dawn. In the gray-blue light, the anniversary house looked like a photograph of itself. I dressed in a soft black sweater and tied my hair back. Work clothes can be quiet. At 8:25 a.m. I was a block from the clinic, parked where Raphael told me to park. My role was the same as always now. Observer, not saboteur. I would not touch the scale. I would only finally read it correctly. The maid arrived at 8:42 in a cream coat, hair glossy, fear tucked into the corners of her mouth. She touched the strap of her bag obsessively. The strap that, if Raphael was right, hid the brush. My husband arrived 5 minutes later, aging fast, his careful suit hanging badly. They did not walk in together. Guilt never does. Raphael's feed pinged my phone. The waiting room. Papers exchanged. A nurse gestured to a side door. My husband's profile on the edge of the frame. Jaw tight, gaze on the floor. While the maid produced a cosmetic pouch and smiled too brightly. For a long, slow minute, nothing happened that anyone who wasn't looking would notice. Then the nurse glanced up to the ceiling camera, the one Raphael had flagged when he pulled the chain of custody footage last week. The nurse's eyes flicked to the pouch, to the maid's hands, to the intake form where my husband had signed his name. Something quiet shifted. The nurse stood, took the pouch and placed it in a clear bag with a label. Standard procedure, she said aloud, and I could hear it even through the thin clinic audio. Chain of custody. My husband looked up, confused. The maid went pale. No one shouted. No one needed to. The net didn't clang. It cinched. I exhaled and felt the kind of relief that isn't joy, it's alignment. For once, the world was tilted the right way. At noon, my attorney called. "We got it," he said simply. "Judge signed the temporary removal. You are acting trustee." I sat down on the nearest step and let my bones feel the weight of that sentence. You are acting trustee. Power, yes, but also responsibility. I texted the foundation's director. Board meeting tomorrow. Agenda: governance, safeguards, rebuilding trust. No press. By evening, the clinic sent official notice. Specimens collected, custody observed, results in 48 hours. The maid went silent on the receiver. My husband called Nate and left a message I could only half hear. "Need you. Come home." Nate didn't come. He texted me instead. "Mom, I messed up. I'm sorry. Tell me what to do." I stared at the small gray bubbles of his follow-up and thought of the boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them sunflowers. I typed slowly. You tell the truth to your wife. You apologize to the girl you hurt. You get a therapist. And you accept that forgiveness is not a right. It is a possibility you have to earn. A long pause. Then okay. I didn't write "I love you." Love isn't a rug you throw over gasoline. It's a firebreak you cut with sweat and time. He could stand on the other side and wave when he'd finished clearing brush. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't turn on the receiver. I sat in the dark of my living room with the rain and listened to my own breathing. Revenge had taught me its sharpness. Now it would teach me its limits. The next sunrise would bring new math. Assets to unwind, a foundation to steady, a family to triage, and a result that would either end a lie or ignite an inferno. Either way, I was ready to stand in the flames without burning. The 48 hours crawled like years. Every minute carried a new possibility. Innocence, guilt, freedom, fire. I filled the hours with order, sorting the trust's records, calling board members, preparing statements that balanced calm with steel. Outwardly, I was the dependable Emma they had always known. Inwardly, I was a blade waiting to fall. On the morning the results were due, I stood at the kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. The house was silent, but my phone was not. First call, Raphael. They're sweating. The maid's pacing like a metronome. Your husband hasn't left his office in 2 days. Second call, my attorney. Results by noon. Judge's office will courier copies. No leaks before then. By 11, my daughter Netilai showed up unannounced, arms full of grocery bags. I brought soup. You won't eat otherwise. Her presence was grounding. We cooked in silence for a while and then she asked, "Mom, what happens if the baby is his?" I looked her straight in the eyes. Then he lives with the truth he created. And I decide what to do with mine. And if it isn't? Then the maid loses her crown before it's even placed. At 12:14 p.m. The courier arrived. A thick envelope, heavy with consequence. I set it on the table, my hand lingering on the seal. Netilai whispered, "Do you want me to open it?" "No," I said. "This one's mine." I slit the envelope and scanned the pages. Negative. The word flashed like lightning in the storm. Probability of paternity 0%. The room tilted with relief, rage, vindication. My husband had gambled his legacy on a lie. The maid had staked her future on a child who was never his. And my son, God help him, had bent his loyalty to protect a fraud. I closed the folder slowly, as if savoring the sound. "It's not his," I said. Netilai exhaled. "So it's over?" I shook my head. "No. It's beginning." That evening I called my husband. He answered on the first ring, voice frayed. "Emma, did you get?" "Yes," I said. "I got it." Silence. Then hoarse. "It doesn't matter. I love her. I'll raise the baby anyway." I laughed bitterly. "Of course you will. You've always loved playing savior. But this time you won't use my name, my house, or my money to do it." He tried to argue, but I hung up. Some conversations don't deserve more than one sentence. The maid, however, wasn't quiet. At 9 p.m., the receiver caught her screaming at her lover. "You promised me," she shrieked. "You said he'd never find out." The lover muttered something about mistakes, about backup plans. But she wasn't listening. "I gave up everything for this," she wailed. "Now I'm ruined." Her words were venom, but to me they tasted like justice. The next day, the trustee board convened. I walked into the wood-paneled room with my blue folder and calm steps. My husband sat at the far end, face gray, tie loose. The maid hadn't been invited. This was business, not theater. The chair cleared his throat. We've reviewed the audit. Significant irregularities, concealed disbursements, and inappropriate personal expenditures. Mr. Carter, until this is resolved, you are suspended as trustee. Mrs. Carter, you are sole acting trustee. The gavel fell. Just like that, 40 years of his control dissolved into dust. He turned to me, eyes burning. You wanted this all along. No, I said evenly. I wanted the truth. Control is just what happens when you stop lying. Later, I visited Hannah, my daughter-in-law. She looked tired but steadier than before. The photos had done their work. I filed the papers, she said, voice flat. Nate begged, cried, promised. I told him tears don't patch a sinking ship. You're strong, I told her. I wasn't before, she admitted. But you showed me what strength looks like. Her words pierced me more than any betrayal had. Strength isn't inherited. It's modeled. Maybe, just maybe, my grandson would grow up watching the women in his life stand tall, instead of watching the men around them stumble. That night, I allowed myself one indulgence. A long bath with lavender oil. I sank into the water and let the silence cradle me. For the first time in weeks, the storm outside my body matched the calm inside it. But peace never lasts long. At midnight, Raphael called. Emma, you need to hear this, he said grimly. Your son's not handling it. He went back to her. Not the maid. Lila. My heart stopped. No. Yes. He showed up at her apartment drunk, begging for forgiveness. She pushed him away, but he wouldn't leave. Cops came. Quiet for now. But the neighbors saw. I closed my eyes. The image of my boy, my baby, clinging to the very girl who had shattered his life. They punished themselves, I whispered, recalling my own words. One dug his grave with lies. The other fell into it. Now I had to decide, do I pull him out? Or let him lie in the pit he dug? I dried my tears, stood, and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was tired, lined, older than ever. But my eyes were clear. Tomorrow, I told my reflection, we face the wreckage. And tomorrow I would. I woke before the sun and drove the empty streets to the lake, where Chicago pretends to be an ocean and people pretend to be alone. Nate was parked where Raphael said he'd been sulking at dawn all week, by the breakwater, windows fogged, shame making a weather system of its own. I didn't knock. I opened the passenger door and slid in, letting the cold slap both of us. He stared ahead. I messed up. Yes, I said. And now you do the next thing. What's the next thing? Stop making it about what you feel, and start making it about what you do. He let out a small laugh that wasn't laughter. You're good at speeches. I'm good at plans. I handed him a paper folder. Inside, a therapist's card, a 45-day outpatient program, a list titled amends that are yours, not theirs. At the bottom, in my handwriting, a letter to Hannah, a letter to Lila, and a letter to the boy who will one day ask why his father lived like a rumor. He flinched. She won't forgive me. I didn't say right to be forgiven, I said. Right to become someone who could be. He rubbed his face. I didn't know about Lila. I know, I said softly. Ignorance is not innocence. But it isn't incest, Nate. It stopped before the worst thing happened. You will carry the almost for a long time. That's its own weight. Carry it with your back straight. He nodded, a boy again for one unguarded second, then older than his years. What about him? He asked, meaning his father. You will stop protecting grown men from their own consequences, I said. That duty falls off you now. My phone vibrated on the console. Raphael. Picked up. Go. Your maid just tried a new game, he said. She texted your husband that she has photos, messages, evidence of gifts from the trust. Wants a payout to avoid scandal. Blackmail, I said. Artless, but yes. You want to let him pay? No, I said, watching the lake's gray light get brighter. I want to let her try. I hung up and looked at my son. You have two choices today, begin or begin later. But you do not get to choose never. I'll begin, he whispered. Then get out of this car, I said, and we both did. By mid-morning, I was back at my desk, arranging the pieces the way a woman arranges votives before lighting a church. I called my attorney to document the attempted extortion, and looped in a former state's attorney, who owed me a favor from a hospice fundraiser years ago. I am not proud of the ledger of favors I have collected across a lifetime, but I am grateful for it now. Some debts are holy. Raphael sent me a location pin. A cheap hotel off the interstate. Loverboy booked a room under a name I've already seen on 3 scams, he wrote. They're meeting your husband here at noon. Cameras? I asked. In the hallway and lobby, yes. Room no. But audio will carry through thin walls if you're patient. Patience had become my cardio. At 11:59 my husband arrived, wearing a coat he saved for no one of consequence. He knocked. The door opened to reveal the maid and her lover, both dressed like cautionary tales. The recording was fuzzy, but greed is a universal language. Her voice sugar, his voice gravel, my husband's voice a thread that kept snapping. You'll wire 100,000 now, the lover said. And another 100 when the baby is born. You have nothing, my husband muttered. The test. We have plenty, the maid cut in quickly. Messages. Photos. Deposits labeled community outreach. How do you think your donors will feel about your outreach? The line was clever. The delivery was not. Raphael's text blinked. Now? Now, I typed back. 2 minutes later there was a knock that wasn't a knock. Investigators. Not police yet. No cuffs, no spectacle, but enough authority to freeze the moment like a fly in amber. They entered with the calm of men who had memorized the statute for extortion in both directions. This is a civil interview, the taller one said smoothly. You can leave at any time. But if you leave, this recording goes to the state attorney's office without your side of the story. The lover blustered. The maid wilted. My husband stared at the carpet like he could fall through. I listened from my kitchen, spine-tall, tea cooling untouched. There is a point in every revenge where you are tempted to pity the prey. I didn't. Pity is for the remorseful. I had yet to see remorse. The interview ended without handcuffs but with paperwork, the kind that makes running feel heavy. When the door closed, Raphael called. You'll have to decide whether to press criminal charges. Not yet, I said. Fear of a future can be more instructive than a present punishment. You're getting good at this, he said, and there was no triumph in him, only respect. I'm getting tired, I admitted. He was quiet for a beat. Rest later. In the afternoon the clinic sent another email, gentler in tone, brutal in content. An apology for procedural irregularities, a promise to cooperate with any inquiry, and the receptionist's resignation letter attached like a fallen leaf. I forwarded it to the medical licensing board and CC'd Leona, who replied with 3 words that made me sit down. We are okay. Sometimes the biggest twist in a story is survival. At 4, I drove to Lila's apartment building with a brown paper bag. Soup bread, a cheap candle that smelled like orange peels in winter. When she opened the door, her face looked less broken, more rearranged. I brought provisions, I said. She stepped aside, a small smile tugging at her mouth. I'm learning that grief is hungrier than I am. We ate on the floor because she didn't own a table. After, she handed me an envelope. I wrote the letter, she said. To your daughter-in-law. I didn't know how to say it, so I said it badly and true. That's how the best letters are, I said. Badly and true. She took a breath. I blocked his number. Good. And I told my mother I'm applying for the city scholarship. If I get it, I can finish without bartending till 3 a.m. You'll get it, I said, and I knew it because I had already called 2 committee members and told them what fortitude looks like on a transcript. When I stood to leave, she touched my arm. I keep thinking about the night at your table, she said quietly. How hard you looked when you told us the truth. I was angry at you. But now I think, maybe that's what love looks like when it's honest. The compliment went into me like medicine that stung. At dusk Hannah texted, he's here. He says he'll do the program. A beat then. I'm not moving the line, Emma. Not again. Don't, I wrote back. After dark, my husband appeared on the front step of the anniversary house as if the past could still braid itself into the present if he only stood in the right light. I'm being blackmailed, he said. You tried to be, I corrected. Past tense. He blinked, thrown. You knew. I caused it to stop, I said. Also past tense. He sagged, the fight leaking out of him. What do you want from me? The list is long and practical, I said. Resignations. Disclosures. A letter to the board. A letter to our children that does not attempt to paint your cowardice as care. A written agreement that you will not involve the foundation or the trust in your private theater again. And finally, you will take your hands off the lives of women you've used like silence. He stared at me a long moment. You've changed. No, I said. I've resumed. He put his hand on the railing like a man about to steady himself before a confession. I don't know who I am without the version of me you believed in. That is not my emergency, I said, and I meant it without cruelty. Find out who you are when no one is clapping. He nodded once, small like a boy caught stealing apples. Then he left. When the door shut, the house did not feel empty. It felt aired out. Just before midnight, Raphael sent the last report of the day. The maid packed. She's leaving town with the lover. Bus ticket, not plane. Cheap. Hasty. She thinks she can start over in a new city. She can, I typed back. But not with our money. I turned off my phone and went to the window. The lake was a black sheet stitched with city light. My reflection looked older and more honest than the woman who had smiled at gala donors and believed gratitude could save men from their appetites. You punished yourselves, I whispered to the dark. I just held up the mirror. Tomorrow there would be another list. Remediation plans for the foundation, therapy for a son who had confused secrecy with love, scholarships granted without strings, a future I would script without someone else's shame borrowing my pen. I locked the door. I slept. And I did not dream of revenge. I dreamed of inventory, what to keep, what to break, what to build from the pieces that finally belonged to me. The next morning the air felt sharp, as if the city itself had been rinsed clean overnight. I stood at the window of the anniversary house, coffee steaming in my hand, and made a new list. Not of vengeance, of aftermath. Revenge ends when the fire dies down. Aftermath is where the real work begins. First item, the foundation. The audit had shaken donors, but it also gave me something rare, credibility. A woman who had been deceived yet stood her ground. I called an emergency board meeting and presented a plan. Stricter oversight, new bylaws, transparency reports. The room listened, wary at first, then leaning in. By the end, they voted unanimously to install me as permanent chair. You've turned survival into governance, one board member said afterward. That's rarer than you think. I smiled faintly. I had 40 years of practice in endurance. Governance is easier. Second item. Hannah. I drove to her apartment with a folder of resources, legal aid contacts, daycare vouchers, a community grant she could qualify for. She opened the door, sun on her hip, exhaustion heavy on her face. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Yes, I told her. I do. Because you are family, whether Nate earns his way back or not. She took the folder and hugged me suddenly, fiercely. It wasn't forgiveness. It was solidarity. Women who had been lied to standing together. Third item, Nate. He had checked into the program the night before. I visited him in the sterile lobby where counselors moved like quiet referees. He looked smaller, stripped of his bravado. I'm here, I said simply. He nodded, eyes wet. Mom, I'll fix it. You can't fix what's done, I told him. But you can choose what kind of man you'll be after the ruin. He lowered his gaze. Will you ever forgive me? I don't answer questions in advance, I said. Show me the work. Then I'll decide. He swallowed hard, but there was something steady in his posture, as if he finally understood that apologies were verbs, not nouns. Fourth item, Lila. She had started classes again, buoyed by the scholarship she'd earned. I met her outside the campus library, handed her a thermos of tea and said, You're building something new. Keep building. She smiled with tentative strength. I will. Thank you for not making me the enemy. You were never the enemy, I said. You were the evidence. She blinked, then laughed softly, like someone realizing they had survived the storm intact. By evening the house was quiet again. Too quiet. I turned on the receiver one last time. The maid's apartment was empty, stripped. No voices, no plans, no laughter. She had left, just as Raphael said she would. A bus to somewhere she believed was untouched by her lies. My husband, however, hadn't vanished. He called at 9 p.m. Voice tired. Emma, I've resigned from the board. I signed the papers. Empty. Good, I said. Now you can start filling with something that isn't deceit. Do you want me gone? He asked. I want you honest, I said. If you can't be that, then yes, gone. There was silence, then a sigh. I don't know who I am without you. You'll find out, I said, and I hung up. Some doors must close completely before new ones open. Later that night, Nettie came over. She set a bottle of wine on the counter and leaned against the sink. You did it, she said softly. You brought everything into the light. I poured 2 glasses. Yes, but light shows the cracks too. Now we decide what to mend and what to leave broken. She studied me for a long moment. You've changed, Mom. I smiled faintly. No, I've remembered myself. We drank in silence, mother and daughter, 2 women remapping a family on their own terms. When I finally went to bed, I lay awake thinking not of revenge but of legacy. My husband had tried to build a legacy of control. My son had nearly built one of silence. The maid had tried to build one of theft. All of them failed because lies rot whatever they're planted in. I would build something different. A legacy of truth, even if it's scarred. A legacy of women who refused to bow to betrayal. A legacy my grandson could inherit without shame. As I drifted into sleep, I whispered to the dark. They punished themselves. I only held the mirror. And tomorrow I would hold it again, steady, unflinching, until none of us could hide from what we truly were. A week later, the city thawed into one of those bright, brittle mornings that make Chicago look like it's pretending to be kind. I dressed in gray, pinned my hair, and carried a folder labeled restitution. Not revenge. Not anymore. First, the foundation. We gathered donors and staff in the sunlit hall where I'd once planned winter galas. I stood at the lectern and told the truth, not as spectacle but as policy. We failed our own standards, I said, voice steady. We have cleaned house, and we will publish the audit in full. My husband has resigned. All misallocated funds will be repaid from personal assets. Our work continues under brighter lights. Applause came like rain on a roof, uneven then steady. Afterward, a widower whose wife had died at the hospice squeezed my hand. You didn't let the rot spread, he whispered. My thanks. Second, the trust. As acting trustee, I signed 3 documents that felt like exorcisms. Title freezes, vendor terminations, and a clause requiring dual signatures for any grant over $5,000. Governance is just love with a ledger. Third, my husband. He arrived late to the mediation with a paper smile. The mediator opened with kindness. I opened with math. I presented a repayment schedule and a public apology. He tried to bargain. I didn't. Emma, he said, small and tight. You are humiliating me. No, I answered. I'm preserving what you endangered. Sign. He signed. Relief and loss tangled in his exhale like smoke that didn't know where to go. When we finished, he lingered. Do you ever look back and miss the simple days? When we were just a young couple in a rented apartment, eating soup out of mugs. I miss the part of us that didn't think we were exceptions, I said. But even then, you were practicing. You just weren't rich enough to scale it. He flinched and left with his apology statement in a trembling hand. Raphael texted me at noon, news from the bus trail. She landed in St. Louis. Same lover, same pitch to a restaurant owner with a soft spot for strays. The owner Googled. Your audit thread is the first hit. An hour later. Lover in cuffs. Outstanding warrants unrelated to you. She's not arrested yet. She's alone, mad, and messaging your husband again from a new number. I stared at the screen. People like him attracted disasters the way porches attract cats. They leave milk out and call it generosity. I texted Raphael, document. No response. At 3 p.m. Hannah called. He's in group therapy. He told them everything. Her voice shook but didn't break. They asked if I wanted to sit in on family day. I said yes. You're braver than I was at your age, I said softly. I learned from your mistakes and your corrections, she replied, and I loved her for the accuracy. I drove to the lake and sat in my car while seagulls conducted their rude congress in the wind. The receiver lay quiet in my purse, but my mind hummed with living radios. Nate's stepwork, Hannah's grit, Lila's transcripts, Leona's quiet consolations, my husband's paper penance. The maid's absence felt like weather finally moving off the map. Evening brought a message from an unknown number that announced itself like a bruise. I'm pregnant and alone. You won. Happy. No name. No punctuation except the question mark like a knife tip. I stared at it a long time. Then I replied. Find the Women's Legal Center on 26th. Ask for Mara. Tell her Emma sent you. She will help with paperwork, with housing, with choices. But there will be no money from us. Not $1. 2 dots blinked then vanished. Maybe she'd go. Maybe she'd spit and move on. Grace is not guaranteed an audience. I went home and found a letter on my porch in my husband's neat, accountant's hand. I opened it at the kitchen counter the way you open results. Slowly, already braced. He'd written to our children as I'd required. He named every lie. He did not dress them up. He wrote to the board, to staff. He wrote a sentence to me. You were the truest thing I ever had, and I squandered you like interest. I neither forgave nor shredded. I filed it under records. We are what we keep. The next afternoon was family day at the program. Hannah and I sat side by side in plastic chairs that squeaked when people shifted their weight under sincerity. Nate stood and read a letter he'd written to his son. Not to me. Not to Lila. To the boy who would one day wonder about absence. I wanted to be a man you could go fishing with. He read, voice thinning and then finding its muscle. Instead I taught you distance. I'm going to earn a different sentence. When he finished he didn't look at us. He sat down hard and pressed his palms into his eyes. I thought about the baby who had screamed in my arms until I walked circles in the living room, whispering nonsense that both of us believed was magic. Love isn't magic. It's repetition. Maybe he was finally learning that. On the drive back, Hannah put her phone in her lap. If he completes the program, we start with supervised visits, she said. If he lapses, we stop. I am done being a soft place for him to land. I'll be a clear place to see. That's more generous than justice requires, I said. It's for our son, she answered. Not for him. That night, Raphael rang my bell. We rarely met at the house. Our friendship had always lived in parking lots and signal intercepts. He held a small cardboard package. Chain of custody drive, he said. Clinic gave me everything in a neat bow once they realized the board might be CC'd on a complaint. Also this. He handed me a second envelope. The receptionist signed affidavit. It named the lover, the bribes, the brush. It named the moment she considered ripping the bag open and didn't. Her final sentence read, I thought of the woman who brings soup to the hospice. I didn't want to be the reason her life got worse. I sat with that sentence a long time after Raphael left. We think our kindnesses evaporate. Sometimes they condense in rooms we'll never enter. A day later, the state medical board called. We appreciate your cooperation, Mrs. Carter. Their tone was clipped, bureaucratic, and oddly respectful. There will be consequences. Let them be educational, I said. Not theatrical. We'll try. By the week's end, the public apology posted on the foundation's site. Donors wrote. Some scolded, most applauded. The paper ran a small piece with a large photo of me at the lectern, jaw set, eyes forward. The caption read, Trust Rebuilt. I didn't believe headlines, but I clipped it from my grandson's scrapbook anyway. You frame what you want them to remember. On Saturday, Leona and Lila came by with a pie that looked like it had survived a bus ride through weather. We ate it slightly warm with forks in the pan like people who have earned the right to be informal. I got the scholarship, Lila said, cheeks pink. And a campus job in the library. No more bartending till dawn. We clinked forks like glasses. Leona squeezed my fingers under the table. One of those quiet, deliberate squeezes that says, we crawled through the same ditch, and here we are breathing on the other side. When they left, the house settled into evening light. I opened the windows and let summer make its first honest promises. My list for the next day was tidy. Finalize restitution. Draft the foundation's annual letter. Visit the program for Nate's Week 2 check-in. Call Hannah about mediation boundaries. Send Lila a gift card for textbooks with a note that said simply, finish. At 9 my phone buzzed. A final text from an unknown St. Louis number. I went to the center. Mara's real. Don't ever contact me again. I typed good. Then deleted it. Some acknowledgments are better kept in the heart where they can't be screenshotted. I walked through the rooms of the anniversary house with bare feet, touching the backs of chairs, the edges of frames, like a woman blessing the perimeter after a long siege. The walls no longer felt complicit. They felt washed. Tomorrow I would say one last necessary thing in one last necessary room. I didn't yet know if it would feel like an ending or a hinge. Only that I would tell the truth without flinching. Only that I would leave with the keys to a life I was finally qualified to own. I blew out the candle on the counter and let the dark be dark, not dangerous. I slept with the windows open. The lake breathed. So did I. The last room I had to enter wasn't a courtroom, or a trustee meeting, or even the kitchen where so many truths had already detonated. It was smaller than all of them. A private conference room at the program where Nate was staying. The walls were beige, the table scarred with coffee rings. And yet, it felt heavier than any gala hall I'd ever stood in. My husband sat at one end, summoned by the mediator. Nate sat at the other, thin from stress but clearer in the eyes. Hannah had chosen not to come, her decision, her line. I sat in the middle, because that's where the truth belonged. The mediator spoke softly. We're not here to relitigate. We're here to acknowledge, and to set terms for moving forward. My husband's jaw was tight, his hair grayer than even last week. Emma, I've signed everything. The board, the trust, the repayments. What else do you want from me? I met his eyes. Nothing. That's the point. I want nothing from you now. Not your money, not your apologies, not your permission. You live your life. I'll live mine. He blinked. That's it. Yes, I said. That's it. Sometimes the harshest punishment is absence. To remove yourself as the audience a man has always performed for. Then I turned to Nate. You've begun the program. That's good. But this isn't about proving anything to me. It's about proving something to your son. He doesn't need a father who's perfect. He needs one who refuses to vanish. Nate swallowed. I'll show him. I'll show you too if you'll let me. I'll watch, I said simply. But I won't shield you. Not ever again. His eyes welled. He nodded. That was enough. The mediator asked if I had anything else to add. I did. This family ran on secrets for 40 years. Secrets fed our pride, our hunger, our cowardice. No more. If you want me in your lives, you'll live in the open. Otherwise, stay hidden. I'm done chasing shadows. The room fell silent. For once, no one argued. 2 weeks later, I stood at the Foundation's annual gathering. Sunlight spilling through stained glass, donors buzzing. I delivered the annual letter myself. This year, I told them, we lost more than money. We lost trust. But we also gained something rare. The chance to rebuild without illusions. Transparency will be our legacy. Truth will be our brand. And I promise you, never again will silence be mistaken for kindness. The applause was warm, but what mattered wasn't the sound. It was the look in their eyes, belief restored. That night, I hosted dinner again at the anniversary house. This time only women. Hannah, with the little boy who toddled between our chairs. Netili, her laughter filling the corners. Leona and Lila bringing pie again. Burnt at the edges, perfect in the middle. Even Maria, who had once helped strangers confess, sat at my table and poured wine. We weren't a family by blood alone. We were a family by survival. Women bound not by betrayal, but by the choice to stop bowing to it. As the evening wound down, Lila asked quietly, "Do you regret it? All the revenge?" I thought for a long moment. No, because revenge got me to the truth. But truth is what I'll carry forward, not the fire. She smiled. Then maybe the fire did its job. Later, when the house was quiet again, I sat on the porch and watched the lake breathe against the shore. The air smelled of lilacs and rain. I thought of the maid somewhere in St. Louis, starting her schemes anew. I thought of my husband in his smaller apartment, papers stacked like confessions. I thought of Nate in therapy, learning how to sit with silence without making it poisonous. And then I thought of myself, Emma Carter, 58, no longer a ghost in her own house, a woman who had walked through betrayal, through rage, through revelation, and had come out holding the only thing that mattered. Her own name untarnished. I whispered it aloud, as if reintroducing myself to the night. Emma. And the lake whispered back. If you watch this video, you now know my story. You know what betrayal looks like when it's exposed to daylight, and what strength feels like when it finally wakes up after years asleep. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the stories I'll tell next week. Because life, my dears, always has another twist. And this time I'll be ready.